Good afternoon. I'm Reverend Dave Thompson. I'd like to welcome you back to our Civil Human Bible Study. I'm a civil human minister, so what that means is that I focus my ministry on building human peace and common ground. So the way that I'm doing this Bible study means that I want to approach it twofold. The first is that I want to be human about the way I'm approaching this. In other words, I want to look at this text and I want to find those teachings that I believe can be applied across the board to all humans. And the second thing is that I want to be civil. I want to respect those basic shared human needs that we all possess. Our need to have a creed of our own, our need to be independent from control, our need to vote for those who will control us, our need to be intimately loved and to intimately love someone else, and last, to live the life that we want to live. And so today we're talking about Matthew chapter 13, 1 through 9, and then 18 through 23. Last show we talked about the parable, and we talked about what that is. It's a method of teaching an idea or a concept that Jesus uses quite often. And as you may recall, the word parable is made up of two Greek words, and that is para and balo, which means to go alongside of and to throw. So it's something that you throw out there alongside of all of the conversation that we're having with regard to the subject so people can have an example to look to. So let's go ahead and jump into Matthew chapter 13, starting 1 through 9. On the same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the sea, and great multitudes were gathered together to him, so that he got into a boat and sat, and the whole multitude stood on the shore. Then he spoke many things to them in parables, saying, Behold, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seed fell by the wayside, and the birds came and devoured them. Some fell on stony places, where they did not have much earth, and they immediately sprang up, because they had no depth of earth. But when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprang up and choked them. But others fell on good ground, and yielded a good crop. Some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear. And then starting in verses 18, this is where Jesus himself explains what this parable is all about. Therefore hear the parable of the sower. When anybody hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, then the wicked one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. This is he who received the seed by the wayside. But he who received the seed on stony places, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet he has no root in himself, but endures only for a while. For when tribulation and persecution arises because of the word, or because of his message, immediately he stumbles. Now he who received the seed among the thorns is he who hears the word, and the cares of the world and deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and he becomes unfruitful. But he who received seed, the good ground, is he who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and produces some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. So what in the world is this parable about? He's talked a little bit about it, but I want to walk through each of these four basic aspects of this sower so that we can really get a clue into not only what Jesus meant back then, but what is applicable, I feel, in the aspect of humanity, things that we can walk away with as human beings regardless of our differences. So the first thing that Jesus says is, right, here's a sower. This is a person who's like a farmer planting seed. He's doing so just throughout his whole field, and some of that seed ends up falling on rocky places, some on the road that goes between the crops, some goes into soil and the weeds choke up, and then the other lands in good soil and ends up producing a good harvest. So what in the world does this mean? Why is he sharing this parable, and what kind of implications did it have back then and now? So the first thing that Jesus mentions is this: alongside the road with no soil, and then he says the birds eat them and basically take all the seeds for themselves. So each one of these people are individuals who have heard the teachings of Jesus, right? Those virtues like peacemaking, compassion, humility, long-suffering, gentleness, those types of things, those virtues that we talked about in Matthew chapter 5 in the Sermon on the Mount. Those are the teachings Jesus is talking about. In this first case, here's an individual who hears about these virtues and grasps it, has a grasp on it early on, but people come into their lives and confuse them and talk them away from it. Really, at this time, Jesus is really talking about the Pharisees, right? You remember these religious leaders who are there calling him demon, the prince of demons and all kinds of crazy things. Jesus is really hinting that these religious leaders are going to come in and try to talk a lot of people out of it. And they're going to say things like, look, all of this, the ritual, the religion, the synagogue, the way we're supposed to do it, the law, that's how we become good. Jesus' whole message is, of course, that being good means doing good to others. It means being compassionate. It means actively connecting with others. So these Pharisees are coming in to try to, get these people off of the track that Jesus is laying. Here and now, what does that mean for us right now? There are a lot of times when we have people in our lives who give us a good message. Right now, these things that I'm reading, they're really good. They've really had an impact on me. And I know many of you they've had an impact on you. The challenge is paying attention to the right people. Because people are going to come in and they're not going to like the fact that you're preaching, or not preaching, but you have these concepts of gentleness and forgiveness, and that's not the way that they want it to work, because they've got a system in place that gives them power. But when we undercut that with good virtues, we will grow and have a real impact on that. The second thing, Jesus says that this sower, the farmer, throws it out and it falls on rocky places. In this case, this is somebody who has heard the teachings of Jesus, these virtues that we're talking about, but there's no deep soil. It's only temporarily rooted, so it grows up really fast. So this is one of those people that come on board and they're super excited about the teachings that they've received and these ideas that they can walk away with, but because they don't focus on understanding them or on actually practicing some of them, when peer pressure comes, they will fade away. And one thing I want to mention, all four of these are sort of a condition of how people receive new news. So something that we should all expect, not only from ourselves, but that when we talk to people, there's going to be people who fit any one of these conditions. So we shouldn't be surprised by it. So the third one is the thorns, right? So this is a person who has heard and received the teachings, and all of a sudden they become overwhelmed with the worry of the world, what their taxes, how they're going to pay the bills, what they're going to do for their family, all of these things that they get concerned about. And it says, Jesus notes that they get concerned about the deceit of riches. I don't have to go far to point out examples of individuals in our society, big and small, who have foregone any kind of morality because they're looking for the dollar or the yen or the franc, whatever it is that they are looking for, it's money and power. Those people will have the hardest time living these virtues. They will have the most difficult time upholding peace and gentleness, because oftentimes to get that dollar, you have to be a divider, you have to be angry, you have to be vindictive, you have to be dishonest. And that's the difference that Jesus is talking about here. So this individual is going to be led astray by, the various problems of the world and riches that they're looking to get. The last one is this, and this is what I'm going to close on with a couple of quick thoughts. This seed that the farmer throws out there, it lands on good soil. What in the world does good soil mean? It means that this person hears the teachings of these virtues, of this good way of living, and to create happiness and to create a happy society. And they spend time understanding. They spend time practicing it. These virtues, becoming a better person, Changing who we are and changing society, it takes practice. It means that we're going to make mistakes. It means that we're not going to live up to the ideas that we want to uphold. But the concept is that we continue to grow. We continue to fight the different obstacles, whether it be wind or rain or whatever it is, but we continue to grow. The good fruit. Remember we talked about good fruit versus rotten fruit? And that word good that is used here, which was used in that past context, it not only means good as in beneficial or valuable, it means good in the sense of being a shining example for other people to see, so that when they look at you and they look at your happiness and the happy people that you've brought around you and the kind of life that you live, they are going to want to live that too. You and I are going to be an example of what happiness looks like in this life. And then Jesus mentions this last point, that they will bear fruit 100-fold or 60 times or 10 times. I appreciate it that Jesus kind of designates the fact that sometimes fruit is multiplied and there's a great abundance of it, and sometimes we just get a couple of apples, right? So there are those of us who, when we practice these things, when we try to understand what is good and virtuous and can make us happy and our society happy, sometimes we may work our whole lives and not get a whole lot of repercussions that are fantastic, but we will have a good life. We will be happy and content. And even if the world is crazy around us, and even if we weren't on stage or in the media and we weren't famous, each one of us can yield a tremendous amount of positivity just by living the way we want to. And what I love about Jesus' take on that whole part is that both of those, the one who creates all kinds of good things and bears a huge harvest, and the one that just bears a few, he sees them as being equal. He sees them as being just as important as one another. And I want to leave you with that thought. It's something that I've had to hold on to as well as an individual, and that is to remember that I may not ever be famous. I may not ever, have a building named after me or be remembered in biographies. But what matters is that I tried. I tried to understand. I tried to encourage others. I tried to practice these good virtues. And what it did for me is it gave me a happy life. I have a tremendous amount of peace, quite honestly. When I gave up a lot of those negative virtues, when I gave up looking for wealth and riches, when I turned to a place of looking for peace, and in this day and age, I want to leave you with this. Peacemaking may seem difficult, but it yields a tremendous harvest, a wonderful harvest, not just around us, but inside of us, because we are at peace. And that's what really matters. We're happy. And the society around us, the people around us are happy. I want to thank you for joining me in this journey. It really does mean so much that you are walking through these teachings with me. They've been a tremendous change for me in my life to see that a lot of these teachings and these scriptures, even though 2,000 years ago, are really applicable today, that humanity has not changed in all of that time. And I want to say to you, until tomorrow, back in the studio here, we had a good time last week on the road and shooting, this Bible study in a bunch of different locations. That was great. Now I'm back here in the studio, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow when we'll talk about the next parable. And until then, I want to say, I love you. And I hope that you choose to love yourself. It is the only love in this world we have any control over. And now I invite you to join me as we go about the rest of our day, loving our neighbors the same way. Thank you.